Made in the USA, the American history of Kawasaki and Honda. Unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably heard US President Donald Trump has been at the focus of some controversy this summer. You might even have heard about him sparring on Twitter with Harley-Davidson. When the motor company talked about ramping up overseas production to avoid potential European tariffs, Trump fired back via a tweet that partially read, "Now that Harley-Davidson is moving part of its operation out of the US, my administration is working with other motorcycle companies who want to move into the US. Other motorcycle manufacturers want to move production to the US." Sounds hard to believe, but we have heard faint hints of at least one European OEM considering assembling knockdown kits in the US, if things get bad. And why not? This sort of thing has happened before in the States, and it worked out pretty well at the time. Starting back in the 1970s, both Kawasaki and Honda had significant motorcycle manufacturing operations in the US, and both ran through the 2000s. The Kawasaki story. Kawasaki broke the ground here as the first Japanese manufacturer to make vehicles in the US. Toyota and the rest of the gang weren't even building cars in the States when Kawasaki opened its plant in Lincoln, Nebraska, in 1974. It was Kawasaki's way of dealing with tariffs and international currency fluctuation, just like you'd figure. The first bike produced was the 1975 KZ400. Humble beginnings, for sure, but that beginner bike was an important part of Kawasaki's line in the 1970s, and it paved the way for the production of the KZ900 Limited in 1976, one of the most important models to ever come from a Japanese OEM. As the first Japanese factory cruiser, the KZ900 Limited was built to take Harley-Davidson's US market dominance head-on, and to a certain extent, it was successful. While the KZ900 Limited model only lasted in the lineup for a few months before the KZ1000 came along, it set a precedent. By the end of the 70s, all the Big Four were making American-style cruisers, and many of Kawasaki's were made right in the USA. At some periods, Kawasaki was actually making more motorcycles in the US than Harley-Davidson. While production of some of those limited models moved to Japan, where they copied the made-in-America custom bits, Morris wheels, Jardine exhaust, it was the revolutionary Kawi plant, dropped straight into the American heartland, that was really behind the boom. As a result, some of those early made-in-America models are actually collectible to the in-the-know enthusiast, particularly that KZ900 Limited, due to its single-year production run and importance in history, says Larry Lecua of Niagara Racecrafters. And he would know. Although his focus was more on the later KZ1000 models, he's been working on Kawasaki machinery and making it race-ready for decades, and even visited the Nebraska plant himself in 2005. In his words, "The American plant blew my socks off, it was phenomenal." Lecua couldn't remember which bikes he'd seen at the plant's assembly line, if any, because by then the plant was just about finished with motorcycle production and focusing on other machinery. Motorcycles are just a tiny part of Kawasaki's huge empire, and along with the bikes, Kawasaki also made ATVs, personal watercraft, heavy machinery, railcars, and other equipment at the plant, and still does, although the bikes are now long gone from the assembly line. But all in all, 36 models were made there, including the KZ400, KZ900, ZX11, ZX6, Ninja 600R, ZG1200 Voyager, ZG1000 Conkers, and maybe most famously of all, the KZ1000P. Some of those models made it to Canada, but many didn't. Canada got made in Japan motorcycles for many of those years, with the US-built machines staying in the American market. And that's okay. A lot of the bikes made in the US conform to American